All right, welcome to the nonStatic podcast, where we explore how to keep moving forward when motivation feels distant. Here, we dive into finding peace and fulfillment in a busy world, discovering how to embrace life opportunities to live with purpose and joy. I'm John Belke, and this is your host and founder of nonStatic, Dr. Josh
Hi.
Belke.
Actually, you're the host, technically.
I guess I'm the host.
You're
yes.
technically the host, yeah.
You're the brains
We're
behind
co-hosts.
this joint.
We're co-hosts.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's Monday for us. Yeah.
It is Monday, and it's a little stormy outside. So
Sure is. We got the lovely Minnesota spring storms.
There's static in the air for a non-static Monday with the storms. So okay.
See what you got there.
Move right along.
See what you did there. All right, that was good.
Oh yeah.
So how was your weekend?
My weekend was fine. I have an older son who's getting ready for prom next weekend, so went and picked up a suit. Nowadays, apparently, we don't wear tuxes to prom; we wear suits. So
no cummerbunds.
keep that in mind. Yeah, didn't want to use my cummerbund from the early 2000s.
I can't imagine why, Josh. I can't imagine why.
Well, and they don't wear vests anymore. Well, Carter's not wearing a vest.
You gotta be. You gotta be super fly to wear a vest nowadays.
I suppose you do.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Carter's pretty fly though.
Yeah, he's a pretty good-looking kid.
Yeah,
He's
darn
a good
right.
kid.
Super tall. Jeez.
I'm a little He is tall. Yeah, he's 6'4", going on 6'5".
Jeez.
Oh no, tall kid.
Beast mode.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, my foreign exchange student Anna, she is.
That's right. She's going to
prom too.
Yeah.
It's gonna be her first and only American prom.
No, that'll be an American experience for her. That's for sure.
She's excited about it.
I bet.
She went to a wedding last night and she had a blast.
An American wedding, huh?
An American wedding. But it was a different one.
Okay.
They had breakfast for dinner. She said it was absolutely fantastic.
Breakfast for dinner.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Nice.
But anyways, today you wanted to talk about something that I struggle with myself.
Sure.
Maintenance.
Yes.
And the title of today's podcast is "When Maintenance Becomes Mastery." It sounds. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah.
Let's just get started right away
Let's
with that.
hop right into it. So we're all aware of like celebrity chefs. You know, Gordon Ramsay, for example.
Yes.
Probably the most famous one.
Right.
Likes to scream at people when they don't make the Wellington correctly. Or the risotto, I think, were the two big ones that he always complained about on the show.
People who go on his show, they're asking for it.
They're asking for it.
He's
actually apparently a really nice guy.
Yeah.
Apparently. But in the show, it's completely different, which is interesting.
It sounds.
Anyway, my point is, nobody claps when a chef sharpens his or her knife, right? Nobody cares.
True.
Right? We clap when they finish the food, but they have to sharpen their knives in order to prepare food correctly. You know, if they're making a tuna fillet, or a sushi chef master needs to have sharp knives to carve tuna and stuff, right?
Right.
But we don't clap when they carve the knife because that's really unremarkable. We clap when they slice through the target, which would be the sushi or the tuna, right?
Yeah, it looks delicious.
But without the maintenance of sharpening the knife, the end result would never occur. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about with maintenance in our lives is a lot of times there's these little things that we have to do on a daily basis, are the routines that we have, the habits that we build, that really are what results in us becoming masters of our lives or masters of a skill that we want to attain. Mm-hmm. You know, the other more personal connection for me, and I wrote about this probably about a year and a half ago maybe in the newsletter, is my mother-in-law is an avid gardener. She has the greenest of green thumbs. And every spring she goes through the work of planting the garden and, well, first getting the soil ready. Mm-hmm. She probably fertilizes it. She hoes it, of course. She has my father-in-law till it, of course. Indeed. And then she rakes it. And then she plans it all out and she plants the plants and puts them all in there, and then it looks really nice. And I'm sure she feels a sense of accomplishment for that. But fast forward, 3-4 months.
Right.
The fall comes around, and there's this bountiful harvest of various veggies that thankfully she's always giving out to her kids.
Oh, nice.
And she makes pickles and just all kinds of great stuff. But she didn't plant the garden in the spring and then do nothing with it for the entire summer.
Right.
There was a lot of work. There was a lot of maintenance work between May, when she plants her garden,
Right.
and then August, September, October, when she actually harvests the garden. And it's that daily maintenance stuff that we don't
The
talk
watering,
about.
the tilling, the weeding.
Yeah, and she doesn't even talk about it. She'll talk about how she planted the garden, she got it all ready, she planted it, and it's good to go now. She never talks about, oh, today I weeded the garden. She never gives us an update in between. But then
That's
she
just
will.
assumed, I
Yeah,
guess.
she will. But then we always comment in the fall about how lush and full her garden is, and how much vegetables she has, and how great they look. And we're all happy to eat them, of course. But we don't talk about the stuff in between. And so a lot of times but without that in between of the daily grind of weeding it and watering it probably and dusting it with insecticide and whatever else she does.
And talking nice to your plants.
And talking
too.
nice to the plants,
Yep.
yes, because they have feelings too.
Gotta do that.
If she didn't do any of that every single day, the end result in the fall would be a garden that's been choked out by the weeds, right?
Right.
But we don't talk about the maintenance part of it. But the maintenance is probably the most boring part of Janet's garden. But it's also the most essential because it's in that maintenance that the growth is found.
Sure.
Obviously, you got to plant the garden, but if you just plant the garden and leave it and don't maintain it over the summer, it's going to die. So maintenance, it's not the enemy of growth. It actually is the growth when you think of it that way.
Oh, it is the growth. Interesting. Okay.
So
That works.
So that's kind of what we had wanted to talk about today. A little bit is how sometimes maintaining things in our life is almost as important as arriving at the end product, if that makes sense, the end result of the goal. Does that make sense?
It does. So, like, have you ever done something that felt like exciting to start out with at first, and then just kind of got boring or dull throughout the process, but you're like, I want the end result, but I really don't want to do the maintenance now?
Well, I think we've all done things like that. You think of the baseball season, for example. Everybody starts out in their baseball seasons excited to play, and there's Major League Baseball has this big thing about opening day baseball, right? And it's always real popular and big. But so that's always exciting to start the season. But any professional baseball player will tell you, like, as much as they love baseball, by the time August rolls around, after they've played well over 100 games.
How many games do they play?
160 something.
That's a lot of games.
That's not even including the postseason.
Oof, that's a lot.
But they'll tell you, like, no matter when you get to that point in the season, it's a grind, and they'll often refer to it as a grind, and we all like to scoff at them. It's probably deserved, like, okay, really,
Making
like
millions
you're
of
making
dollars
millions of
playing
dollars
the
playing the
game.
game. Come on, but the fact of the
Right.
matter, the fact remains that human nature gets bored over time.
Sure.
But for these players to play at a very high level, they have to maintain their skills, not just in preparation for that exciting first game, but they also have to maintain their skills after they've played over 100 of them. So it's kind of an example of, to continue growing as people and to continue striving towards excellence, you have to have that component of maintenance.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. If you don't use it, if you don't routinely refer back to things that you're learning and you're doing, you're gonna get rusty.
Right.
Just like with myself and music, I haven't. I mean, I think I like to think I used to be pretty decent at playing the piano and guitar.
Yeah.
But then I stopped practicing.
Shocker.
I stopped the monotony of it, the maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm looking at these things. I pick up my guitar. I'm like, what's a G chord? How do I do this thing? And so yeah, it's the maintenance is key to at least keeping your skills sharpened, and then obviously growth too.
Yeah, and one of the things that complicates it is we tend to love what I call moments of brilliance.
Mm-hmm.
And those are what everybody likes to see. To continue picking on social media, that's what we kind of see on social media all the time, is the moments of breakthrough, right?
Right.
Or you look at a election process. We talk about the big breakthrough that we talk about is when the person finally gets elected after, but what we don't necessarily talk about as much is the months and sometimes years that went into getting to that moment of breakthrough.
It is a grind.
We tend to highlight the awards or the personal record moments or the big wins, but we tend to sometimes forget all the work that we have to put in before that in order to achieve the goal.
I think that may be kind of why, this is just a thought that just kind of popped in my head. Maybe that's why there's all these like advertisements and scams for really like get rich quick stuff.
Yeah.
It's like everyone wants that big win, that big breakthrough, but they want it, and they want it right now. They don't want to have to work for it. They don't want to have to go through the grind that literally anybody else who has ever been successful has had to do.
Yeah.
They want that get rich quick scheme.
Yeah.
Win the lottery or whatever without going through that work.
Well, and it's all gets back to, and we've talked about it on here before too, is the idea of dopamine, and I call it the dopamine of newness. Starting something new feels good, and it feels like today's I'm going to start something, and it's a new day. It's a new day and a new goal and new skill I'm learning. The problem is starting something feels really good, but the maintenance that goes into those types of things rarely triggers that same chemical reward. That's why you've seen people that are constantly starting and stopping things, or just starting things but never finishing them. I think would be the better way to say it, because starting it, you always have that level of motivation because you get that dopamine hit, and
that's why the gyms are so popular at the beginning of the year.
Exactly. And the problem is eventually that dopamine hit goes away.
Right.
And then we lose our motivation subsequently. And it's really easy to let that maintenance thing go by the wayside. But it's in that moment when you force yourself to continue maintaining what your goals are, what you're wanting to do, that's where you see the real growth, and that's where the breakthroughs ultimately come from.
Sure.
Is maintaining it over time. We've talked a lot about, but you've always heard the term, overnight success. And there's people that are these quote overnight success, but really are they really? No.
Right.
Unless you've won the lottery, you're probably not an overnight success. Although I would argue winning the lottery doesn't make you successful.
No,
but
in many cases, it actually hurts you.
Right.
In the long run.
But behind really super successful people are the boring hours of maintenance and care that they have to put in. They're the ones working on whatever it is they're trying to achieve in the moments when they'd rather sit down and watch Netflix, for example.
Right.
Or they're the ones working on whatever their goal is, after 5 p.m. after they came home from work after a long day and they just want to put their feet up. It's in those moments when they continue to work on maintaining what they're working towards. That's where you really see the growth.
I know we're going to be talking about how to maintain your motivation in a little bit, but just like with the whole Netflix thing or do the work, in that moment, what do you think someone could do? Like, hey, if they really want to make a meaningful change and they are working towards something, they're in the monotony phase, like everything's a grind that I'm doing here, it's not exciting, and they just want to watch a Netflix show. In that moment, like, I want to watch Netflix, but I probably should do this instead. What would you do in that situation to like kind of snap you out of it, to like get you into the motivate or like doing the work?
Yeah, I think where people tend to struggle is when they have the mindset of deprivation. So, for example, if someone has a goal of studying for a board exam or whatever goal you want to pick. And they get to the end of a long day and they just want to sit down and relax for a little bit. But if their mindset is, I need to go do this one thing for hours at a time and therefore I can't do this, that's kind of a deprivation mindset. So they're giving up something. That's where and that's overwhelming for a lot of us. If we say, well, I can never watch Netflix again, or I cannot watch Netflix at all tonight because I have to go do this, that's automatically going to put up some resistance, and that's where a lot of people tend to give up in that moment and just not try. What kind of helps is to give yourself permission to watch Netflix, for example, to use that example, but say, I'm going to do this maintenance thing for 5 minutes first. and then I'm going to come back to it.
Just to do the one little
Yeah,
thing.
because a lot of times it's starting it that is the biggest challenge. And once you get started
Right.
on it, you can actually find that you're able to work on something for a longer period of time. And it's just that getting that over that initial hump of starting something.
Wanting to
Yeah.
completely relinquish your mind
Yeah.
to whatever's on the tube.
Yeah, because as human
Yeah.
beings, we tend to gravitate towards comfort and the safety that comfort brings.
Mhm.
Right? We equate comfort with safety, and that's why the television is, quite frankly, the most highly used appliance in American
Right.
living rooms or American homes, right? Because
Right.
it's comforting. It allows you to shut your brain off and just kind of zone out and be entertained.
You know what? Apparently, and this is kind of a little bit of a side note.
Mhm.
What I don't know if I should probably have looked this up before I'm saying this, but I've heard from numerous people that the term entertainment ultimately means to surrender your mind.
That's true.
I should look that up to see if that's factual or not. But when you think about it, it really is. If you're sitting there watching TV, you are literally surrendering your mind. Like your mind is as blank as can be. And if I remember correctly, there have been some studies done.
Yeah.
Like when you are watching TV, you're almost doing less than when you're sleeping.
Yeah. That is very true.
Like your brain has less activity than when you are sleeping, which is wild to me.
You're making me feel guilty because I parked yesterday afternoon. I was parked on the couch watching NBA playoffs most of the afternoon. So you're making me feel guilty. But that all I have to say is, it's not to say you shouldn't watch TV.
Right. I just find that fascinating.
But it is fascinating. Like
Yeah.
I think overconsumption of media in general, whether it's video games or TV, it's not bad, but the more you engage in it, the more detrimental it is to you. I don't want to say harmful, but the more it's going to kind of hold you back. Because you're right, it's kind of like a negative net gain to watch TV. You know, at least if you're reading a book, you're stimulating your brain.
Right.
You're exercising your neural pathways, whereas TV, it's all fed to you.
Right. You don't have to do any imagining. You don't have to do any. There's no creativity involved.
Exactly.
None of that.
Yep. And that's why it's so habit forming. I'm not going to say addictive, but that's why it's so habit forming.
I'd say it's
for
addictive.
People. Yeah.
I really would say it's addictive because or maybe habit forming.
Well, there's a reason why, and we should maybe do a podcast on this one sometime, is the video game addiction. Like in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, it's the diagnostic guideline for mental health. It actually lists video game addiction as a disorder for further study. It's not an official diagnosis, but it will be very soon because it has addictive qualities to it. So
that's crazy.
Anyway,
yeah,
we digress a lot on here, but just to kind of cap what we just talked about is that dopamine. The reason why we love starting things is because it gives us a dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem a lot of times that we have with maintaining things over time or seeing things through to completion is because eventually that dopamine hit goes away. Right. And then we're left with our own ability to self-motivate to kind of go through it. So we've established that maintenance is important, and it's kind of this silent engine that runs our lives. Mm-hmm. In some way, shape, or form. We're maintaining our life somehow. It's just kind of, what does your maintenance look like? Well, for someone that's a skilled musician, to use your example, it's the guitarist that's really good that practices the scales that nobody hears. Mm-hmm. You know, Santana, hopefully people listening know who Santana is.
We're kind of dating ourselves a little bit.
We're dating ourselves, but he was still a good guitarist is a good guitarist.
That's right. Legendary.
But he just didn't show up on stage. I know this is painfully obvious, but he just didn't show up on stage and play, right? He put in hours and hours and hours of practice and years of practice before he ever made it big, you know. And he did that without anybody ever seeing him, you know.
Good point.
You know, it's the marathoner doing stretching routines when nobody's watching. You know, everybody can see you run, but does everybody see you stretch? Probably not. But it's those little maintenance things that go a long way. More practically, you look at our relationships. Maintenance in a relationship may look like checking in before problems explode and get out of hand. You know, I think we've all been in relationships where we perceive that there's kind of an undercurrent of a problem, but we don't really know what it is.
It's kind of
So we're just going to kind of like pretend it's not there and just kind of, maybe it'll solve itself. But maintaining a relationship in a healthy way would be to check in on what that is. And sometimes there is something there, and sometimes it's just your own perception that there is something there.
Sure.
But that's kind of what maintenance looks like in a relationship. It's kind of putting in the work when it's not really fun to do so.
Right.
It's kind of like the sharpening the knife thing analogy that I used previously. It's tedious work to sharpen a knife, but a dull blade fails the task it was built for.
It's actually dangerous to be cooking
very
with
true.
It's very dangerous to be cooking with a dull knife.
Very true.
I can attest to that.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind is that maintaining our lives builds resilience. Okay. So the systems we put in place, this helps develop the skills. So the system skills, health and relationships that aren't maintained, they tend to rot over time, or they tend to stagnate. Or the other term I use is they atrophy over time. Like the muscle, if you don't exercise the muscle over time, it atrophies, which means it shrinks and loses a lot of its function.
That can be very true for relationships in general, because or like friendships. Like if you don't maintain your friendships, if you don't hang out,
right,
even once or twice a year at least, those relationships, those friendships will go away.
Right.
They'll dissipate.
They'll just kind of disappear. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So when does maintenance become mastery? And so really the idea that I was going towards with maintenance is, at first maintenance kind of feels like survival. But over time it becomes that foundation for mastering the things in life that we want to be masters of. And really, what is mastery? It's showing up even when you don't feel like it. So if you've mastered a part of your life, it means that you're dictating to it what's going to happen rather than it dictating to you. And what I mean by that is, if you've mastered a skill, it means that you've pushed through the difficult parts of it. So one of my hobbies obviously is golf. And what is someone that masters golf? What have they done? They don't just show up and play a round of 18 on Saturdays. Some people do that, but they're certainly not masters of the sport of the game of golf. The masters of the game of golf are the ones that show up and are hitting golf balls, hundreds of golf balls before the tournament even arrives.
Right.
I believe it was at the last Masters, Bryson DeChambeau. I could be getting the person wrong because Rory McIlroy actually won the Masters this year. But Bryson DeChambeau was in the mix. I think he took second or third, maybe a little lower. But anyway, he was in the top tier. He had a round that fell below his expectations, and so after one of his rounds at the Masters, he went out to the driving range and had them put the floodlights on so he could hit some golf balls after a 4.5-hour round at the Masters. So that's mastery.
That's tiring.
That's mastery.
Right.
Yeah, but that's mastery.
Yeah.
Is showing up when you don't feel like it. I can promise you, Bryson DeChambeau, even though he's made his millions in golf, that was the last thing he wanted to do after a bad round at the Masters was go hit golf balls at the driving range.
Right.
But masters of their skill do that.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Other examples that I kind of pulled up for here are Kobe Bryant back in the day. One of the things that he had is he was an amazing master of basketball. And he was obsessed with practicing just the basics. He was one of the most intense people at practice whenever he did it, and it showed in his game. The other thing is Stephen King. You know how we always comment about how easy it seems for Stephen King just to throw out a book.
He's always putting out books.
Did you know that his goal is that he writes every single day? Every single day. Even when he doesn't have the inspiration to do it, he said he writes every single day, 7 days a week.
I wonder what he writes, though, when he doesn't have any inspiration.
I don't know.
Just
not sure.
Types and words come out.
Yep.
And that makes sense why he's had so many bestsellers.
Yeah. Yep. Other examples, entrepreneurs. A lot of very successful entrepreneurs succeed because they manage those boring operational parts of a business, not just the big visionary stuff. So it's being in the grind and addressing those problems and maintaining their business.
It's kind of where you kind of get that slight edge is like when you or where someone has that, like, it seems like they have that it factor. Like,
Yeah.
What are they doing that's different that's making them stand out? Well, they're just putting in the work. They're putting in the reps that that most of society is not willing to do. And basically with the slight edge, there's a book about it. I forget who I think it was like David Olson or something like that. The slight edge. Your goal is to get 1% better every day.
Right. Yep.
Just a little bit better. What does that mean? If you write 2 sentences in your journal, write 3 sentences.
Right. Yep.
The next day. Or if you're reading, if your goal is to read an hour a day, just force yourself to read 2 minutes, and then the next day 3 minutes.
Yep.
And then just continue. Then just don't give up.
Right.
Every day. Stephen King writes.
Yep.
Every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also found that someone that I was mentored by for a while, he said, you know what, what you feed on, you're ultimately going to crave. So if you're craving Netflix or watching a show every night,
yeah,
that is your comfort zone.
Yep. That's
what you're craving because that's what you're feeding on. In the same way, for even honestly doing the hard work, the grind, if you get to a point where you're doing it every day, you're being very consistent with it, on the days that you don't do it, that's intensely uncomfortable because
right.
Like, hey, my system is off, my habits, your body and your mind is gonna be like, hey, let's get back on this track.
Yep.
So while it's hard to stay motivated, once you're used to the grind,
mm-hmm.
it gets a little bit easier to do the grind.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And I would also add that maintenance is also acknowledging that as human beings, we're imperfect and we're going to miss along the way.
Right.
And giving yourself grace and giving yourself the dignity of, I missed this today, and then picking it up the next day.
That's the big one.
Sometimes it's really easy. Oh, we failed once. We failed. Now I'm just going to throw the whole thing away. We don't consciously think of that, but that's kind of what we do. If we miss a day, I might as well not do it today either because I missed yesterday.
Right.
Maintenance is knowing you're going to have hiccups along the way and missteps along the way, but then continuing to trudge forward.
Sure.
And to kind of get to your point, getting a little bit better every day. Really successful people that have mastered their lives or mastered areas of their life, they would say that they really don't have any breakthroughs because it feels like the result that they're striving for is the natural consequence of many quiet days of maintaining something.
It's expected.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
They feel like they've earned it.
For them, to us, it may seem like a big breakthrough, but to them, it's like, well, yeah, it's cool, but this is what I planned to have happen, and this is what I worked towards. So I'm not really surprised.
It showed up a lot later than I expected it to.
This certainly wasn't a surprise to me at all.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I'm here is what they'll tell you.
I suppose that giving off that frequency, like, yep, I'm old, like I've earned this, like it's expected, it's demanded in some ways.
Yep.
It's gonna be a good feeling.
Yeah. So how do we shift our mindset then? If we're struggling to kind of maintain what we're working towards, it's important to kind of shift our mindset a little bit, and we can kind of reframe maintenance as building momentum. Maybe that may be a better way to put it in some respects, and that is each act builds on itself. We've talked about thought stacking in the past briefly, and we won't talk about it here, but the same, the idea of thought stacking is over time, if you have similar thoughts, that's what you're going to naturally think about. So if your thoughts if you allow negative thoughts to stack up, you're going to become a negative person. If you allow positive thoughts to stack up, you're generally going to tilt towards being a positive person, right? It's the same thing with what we're doing. Is every act that we do builds momentum. So whatever we're trying to master, or whatever we're trying to maintain or work towards, each act compounds upon itself. And in the book,
Compound Effect.
No. Oh, the real popular one. It's at the tip of my tongue. Atomic Habits. He talks. James Clear talks about this idea of the aggregate return, which is every little every little act that you do builds on itself. And does each small thing that you do look like it's contributing to the bigger overall picture? Not really, but over time, it all adds up. And suddenly all these small things you did over time have produced the result that you're looking for.
Sure.
So each act compounds even if it feels invisible. And the obvious parallel to that is investing, the investing world, right?
Right.
Why do 401ks work? Because you're putting money away and then the interest compounds over time to hopefully allow you to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And does the $100 you're putting away every paycheck, just as an example, look like it's going to allow you to retire? Well, probably not. But 10 years down the road, after you've stacked away $100 every paycheck, suddenly you're looking at something very, very different rather than just the $100 that you've missed out on.
And and that actually kind of hopefully I can do this analogy correctly. With the 401k investing, what's also important about that is it's very ritualistic. It's very consistent. It's
Exactly.
Every single pay period is dollar cost averaging.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have people like me I have my 401k.
Yeah.
I mean, I use that as much as I possibly can. But then I also have like a retail account just
Sure.
to do some stuff on my own to learn more about the stock markets. And for so long, I've always tried to time the market.
Yeah.
And like I want to buy the dip and I want to wait until it's the absolute lowest. But then you end up with FOMO.
Mm-hmm.
And you miss a lot.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to predict the market.
Yep.
Except that over time it's going to go up.
Right.
That's just
Yeah.
if it's not going to go up over time, then there's a bigger problem at hand. We're not really going to be worried about our 401ks.
Well, the market's actually very predictable. It's either going to go up or it's going to go down.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Historically, it has always risen, even after.
Historically, it's trended up.
Trended up.
Trended
yes.
up.
Trended up.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're a couple of finance experts here, so
indeed.
People should definitely
take our financial
take
advice.
our financial
Yeah.
advice.
But anyways, what I was saying is
don't.
yeah, don't take our advice. I found that whenever I try to time the market, I lose every single time.
Mm-hmm.
I always lose.
Yeah.
I'm not in it. It's not my career. It's not my choice.
Yep.
But I always do better when you dollar cost average, and that's like the maintenance piece, like just doing a little bit every time.
Yep. And what that is building a ritual.
Right.
Of, in this case, investing over time. So if you build a ritual around it, meaning a habit that's important to you, that's kind of what I define a ritual as. A habit that's important to you. If you create a ritual, not just a task, you're going to bring more meaning into why you're doing it. So kind of like keeping the why you're doing it in mind helps bring meaning to that maintenance or that repetition over time. It's kind of like the chef needs to fall in love with sharpening the knife, not just slicing the prize at the end. They need to appreciate the process. Doesn't mean that you have to like it necessarily, but to appreciate the process.
I personally think that those talented chefs, I think they like to show off their knife sharpening skills because
I think they do.
They do some showiness of it.
True.
I like it, at least on the TV, anyways.
Well, true.
So there's that.
Well, you should just fall in love with laundering the chef attire then.
And there you go.
Yeah. Rather than not just the cooking, perhaps.
Right.
So to kind of wrap it up, the big idea I want people to leave with is that the ones who win aren't the ones who shout out at the starting line. They're the ones who are still moving when nobody's watching.
That's a good point.
Right? So I just want people to keep in mind that the little things we do every day is going to be much more effective at achieving what we want to achieve rather than looking for these big moments, these big breakthrough moments. Because it's that maintenance that kind of builds to those breakthrough moments.
Right. Just to digress. One thing I've noticed too is like when you see these massive success stories, let's just say for businesses. I mean, of course, when you see the interviews, they're measured, they're not bouncing off the walls excited kind of a thing. It's kind of like, yep, this is the next iteration. This is the natural best next step. And I always thought like, man, if our business 100 times or 100x'd, and value
Mm-hmm.
and growth and all that stuff, I would just be bouncing off the walls. I'd be doing,
Yeah.
I would just be crazy. Well, if and when that happens, would I be excited? Still, absolutely, I will be
Right.
excited. But it would be expected, and so I wouldn't
True.
be bouncing off I wouldn't be bouncing off the walls. I would celebrate,
Yeah.
but I'd be mature about it. I'd be calm. I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, we won the lottery. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just like so like when I see those interviews, I'm like, and then once I learn more about the monotony and the maintenance part. When I understand that, like what they actually went through, it's like, yeah, it would make sense that they're not going nuts. It's like it's expected.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Okay.
It's kind of what you're getting at is
It's not
sadly
the success is not a surprise to them.
exactly, and kind of the success when people have achieved it is kind of anticlimactical. You know, like, oh,
This is what it
well,
was.
this is it.
Right.
Just because somebody that's worked towards something, they've familiarized themselves with it so much that it's kind of, well, okay, well, now it's here.
Something happened with me. I forget exactly what it was, but I remember having that feeling, like remembering, like working really hard to get towards something. I'll remember this as soon as we're done recording.
Yeah.
But then when I achieved it, I was like, oh,
Okay.
all right.
On to the next thing.
There we go. On to the next thing.
Yep.
And it was actually kind of a big deal, but to me
Yeah.
it wasn't because it was expected.
Well, to other people, it's a
I
big
earned it.
deal, whatever it was, is because they just saw the end result. They necessarily didn't see everything else that
Good
you had
point.
put in, whereas you had, and so you'd familiarize yourself with it.
Right. Good point.
But that kind of leads into kind of a reflection that I want people to think about, and we don't need to answer it, but it's just something for listeners or viewers to think about is, where am I mistaking boredom for a lack of progress? Sometimes when we perceive that we're not making progress on something, that's not really true. It's just that we've, on some level, become bored with it, perhaps.
Right.
So where am I mistaking boredom for lack of progress? And then, what are some habits, skills, or relationships that need more sharpening from me right now? Meaning, need more maintenance from me. Not necessarily big goals to focus on within those contexts, but what areas need just some maintenance, more tending to than I have been giving. Closing thought for me is that mastery doesn't announce itself. It's made quietly through 1,000 acts of maintenance.
That's deep.
It's deep. Yeah.
That's deep.
Very deep.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's about 1,000 acts deep right there.
1,000 acts. Yep.
Yep. See what I
Agreed.
did there? Yeah. I like that. Yeah, you don't really. There's not much else to say aside from that.
That's all I got.
I'd say that's a good way to wrap up.
Okay.
I got nothing else too.
Me neither.
Well, let's close it out, shall we?
Sounds good.
Let's do it. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of the nonStatic podcast. If you'd like to stay connected and dive deeper into finding peace, focus, and fulfillment, be sure to sign up for Josh's newsletter at nonstatic.org. And remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with their mental health, we're here to help. Please reach out to us anytime at Inspire Services. And take care. Keep moving forward.
Enjoy the journey.
See you there.